Hi, welcome to the video The Typical Project Lifecycle. I have great pleasure in introducing to you Marina Busan-Swirska, who will be making the next 3 presentations covering the typical project lifecycle of a public sector project, Prozoro and public bid, how to make a bid, 10 tips to completing a successful tender. Marina has extensive experience in managing complex projects, including those on Ukrainian government digital platforms, including the Prozoro platform. Indeed, she is responsible for the development and management of the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, a global platform addressing key governance issues of the oil, gas, and mining sectors. Therefore, she is in an excellent position to make the next 3 presentations. I am sure that you will find these both interesting and of practical benefit. They will definitely make it much easier and faster for you to master the processes of responding to public sector project tenders. Well, that's enough from me. Let me now hand you over to the very capable Marina.
Thanks, Oleksiy. Hi everyone, I am really pleased that ICC Ukraine has asked me to make these 3 videos in support of the Rebuild Ukraine program. I am also delighted that you are interested in learning more about the program and how to participate. The first of these presentations covers the typical project life cycle of a public sector project, from inception to completion. Understanding this process is important as it allows you to plan and prepare for any bids that you decide to make. Believe me, the more time you have, the better you can prepare, and therefore the greater the possibility of winning. Understanding the life cycle will also help you understand the value of ICC's Rebuild portal and how this can become an integral part of your planning process. As a first step, I thought it would be helpful to look at the standard 5 phases of a project management life cycle. I then explain the 2 additional phases in Rebuild Ukraine public sector projects. To set expectations, a point I would like to make clear before we go into the details of the project life cycle of Ukrainian public sector project. There is no guarantee that just because a project has been initiated that it will progress to project completion. Projects can be cancelled for a variety of reasons at any stage of their progression to contract conclusion. Of course, the more developed the project, the less likely it is to be cancelled. It is also true that the more critical the project, repairing destroyed critical infrastructure, for example, the faster the approval processes and the greater the certainty that the project will be completed as fast as possible. Right, let's get started on describing the phases of the project life cycle. The life cycle of any typical project consists of 5 phases. Initiation. You explore the project's requirements and analyze the scope, risks, and benefits. Planning, forming the project team and allocating tasks to create the action plan. Execution, turning the action plan into reality. Monitoring, checking that the project is on track and making any necessary adjustments. Closing, finishing the project and reviewing the experience to see what lessons have been learned. These are all mirrored in Rebuild program projects, together with the additional phases of funding and open procurement. These 2 additional phases are managed via the Ukrainian government platforms, DREAM and Prozoro. As we will see, DREAM is where projects are initiated, refined, and put forward for funding. Prozoro is the Ukrainian government procurement platform where projects are subject to open procurement. To give you an overview of these phases, on the next slide, we will see a simplified project flow. Here we can see the simplified project flow that I prepared. In DREAM, projects are initiated, refined, budgeted, and prepared for funding and approval. Once a project has been funded and approved, it is then registered with Prozoro where the open tender process takes place. This tender process can be summarized as consisting of 6 phases. Bidding. Companies post their offers. Qualification. Companies are told whether they qualify or not to enter the auction phase. Auction. The auction takes place. Contract award. After the auction, a decision is made who has won the contract. This is based on published criteria, so there should be no surprises. The winner then contracts with their counterparty. The winning details are then published on Prozoro. The project then enters the implementation and completion phases, all of which are published on Prozoro and Dream. One of the goals of these two platforms is to provide a complete audit trail. This guarantees maximum transparency and reduces the scope for corruption to the minimum. In the following slides, we'll have a closer look at Dream and Prozoro, where I will explain each of these phases in more detail. Right, let's start at the beginning with Dream. The core use for Dream is to plan and track the money around recovery and reconstruction spending. It allows for communities to develop and propose their own priority projects and to match these to Ukrainian government and/or international funding. Similarly, it allows for donors and government authorities to either match existing Dream projects to their funding needs or to run selection processes to look for projects that meet their needs. Here you can see Dream's website. This is open to everybody. Anyone can query the database and see a project's progress. For your convenience, I have included a link to the website in the description below. On the next slide, I will describe the Dream phases in more detail. As I mentioned above, in Dream there are a number of phases. These are categorized under two main project statuses: initiation and active. Let's begin with initiation. Under this classification, we have 4 phases. Project initiation begins at the community or agency level with the identification of a need or reconstruction task. Once a project concept is formulated, it is entered into the Dream platform. Dream provides a standardized digital form to describe the project, including its detailed technical specifications, project designs or bills of quantities, eligibility requirements, and the expected budget. This is often a cost estimate set as the starting bid ceiling. There will also be the evaluation criteria for bids. Next comes the planning stage. Here, the focus is on refining the project proposal and ensuring it aligns with broader strategic priorities. Ukraine has instituted a Strategic Investment Council, chaired by the Prime Minister and comprising key ministers, to coordinate development and evaluation of public investment projects. The project then moves on to budgeting and project approval. Dream's role in budgeting is crucial. It displays which projects are being considered for funding and which projects have been approved together with their funding status. Of course, not every proposed project can be funded immediately. They must be prioritized. The Strategic Investment Council reviews this portfolio to decide which projects will receive public funding in upcoming budgets. The budget allocation or funding sources are confirmed for the project, for example, amount from state budget, local budgets, or donor funds for that year. This includes whether a project is fully funded or requires additional financing. In late 2024, the Council endorsed a pipeline of 787 projects, with an initial 92 top priority projects, totaling around UAH 25 billion hryvnias in value. That's more than $600 million. The projects selected for funding were in areas such as healthcare, education, energy, transportation, and demining. Additional funding if needed. Once the Council approves a project, it means the project is authorized to proceed and can seek any required additional funding if needed. Once a project has secured approval and budget, even if partial, its status in Dream moves from initiation to active. In this phase, the detailed project specifications are finalized and completed. The tender documentation is prepared. These details are then copied across to Prozoro, the Ukrainian government's procurement platform. However, when transferring the project to Prozoro, it is possible for a project to be split into separate sub-projects. On the next slide, we'll have a look at how this is structured. As indicated in the image on the slide, you should note that each project in Dream can be split into multiple individual Prozoro projects. Each will have its own set of tender documentation and tender criteria. If this happens, a common Dream UID is shared, shown on both the Dream project and all Prozoro-related projects and sub-projects. A separate Prozoro UID which identifies the sub-project is allocated to each sub-project. This Prozoro UID is used when making a bid. You will see this in the video Prozoro and Public Bid, How to Make a Bid. You should also note that it is very possible that these individual sub-projects progress at different rates. Next, let's have a look at Prozoro. Here you can see the main Prozoro website. Again, for your convenience, I have included the web address in the description below. I think at this point it is worth spending a few more words describing Prozoro. Prozoro is a centralized electronic open source database enabling public procurement in Ukraine. Prozoro was developed as a joint effort of the Transparency International Organization, the Ministry of Economic Development and Trade of Ukraine, volunteers, NGOs, and other participants. It predates DREAM, which has been created specifically for the Rebuild Ukraine program, whereas Prozoro processes all public sector contracts. The Prozoro platform is owned and operated by the state enterprise Prozoro. By law, the following Ukrainian institutions are obliged to carry out procurements through Prozoro: central executive state authorities such as ministries, monopolies such as Ukrainian railways, local authorities such as municipal administrations, communal enterprises, these are companies owned by local communities. As you can imagine, Prozoro processes tens of thousands of contracts every year. Prozoro allows for many types of procurement process, each with its own phases and status. To keep things simple, I will describe the process, open bidding with features, which applies to the vast majority of public sector projects financed under the Rebuild Ukraine program. Let's go through these on the next slide. Prozoro project phases and status. By law, all Ukrainian public sector contracts have to be posted on Prozoro, not just Rebuild Ukraine projects. All the relevant information and contractual processes are conducted and recorded through Prozoro. The process, open bidding with features, follows this structured process, bidding phase. As I described 2 slides ago, in DREAM, the procuring entity publishes the tender details in DREAM, which are then copied over to Prozoro. Interested contractors or suppliers can now submit their bids electronically. Prozoro's platform ensures all bids remain unseen until the bidding period closes. Qualification. Qualified bidders are informed and invited to take part in an auction. A qualified bidder is one who has satisfied all the technical and administrative requirements of the bid. It does not mean that they have made the best offer. Auction takes place. The auction is held, starting with the lowest price. Qualified bidders then make their final bids. Bidders have the option of revising their bid 3 times. Winner declared. After the auction, the procuring entity evaluates the lowest or best bid against the published tender requirements. Prozoro records all steps of the evaluation. The winner is selected according to the predetermined criteria. The award decision and contract details are then published on Prozoro for public view. Contract conclusion. The winning bidder finalizes the details of the contract with the procuring entity. Prozoro logs the contract particulars, including the agreed price, timeline, and the contractor's name and contact details. The contract and any subsequent addenda or changes are openly available from the platform. Once procurement is completed and contractors are on board, the project enters the implementation phase. This involves actual construction work, service delivery, or whatever activities the project entails. Monitoring is critical at this stage to ensure the project stays on track financially and time-wise and achieves its intended results. It sounds like a lot of phases to be completed before a contract is awarded, doesn't it? I appreciate that in addition to understanding processes, it is also important to have an idea as to timelines. Unfortunately, it is impossible to set out a typical timeline for a project that is in DREAM. The time from initial publication to when it is approved for publication in Prozoro is subject to too many variables. However, once a project is published in Prozoro, it is possible to estimate the timeline, which I will share with you on the next slide. Here I set out a typical Prozoro project timeline. It goes without saying that the more complex and the bigger the project, the longer the likely timeline. The bidding process begins with the publication of the tender. This will also tell you the deadline for submitting bids. Your task is to prepare the documentation. The more you prepare drafts before the official opening of the bidding, the quicker you'll be able to complete this process. Allow for a few days to a maximum of a couple of weeks. There is then the option to request clarification of any points that are unclear in the tender documents. You should allow 3 to 5 days for this. Proposal acceptances. Prozoro usually allows from 2 to 15 days. If you pass proposal acceptance, you will then be advised and given a date for the auction. The auction itself can last from just 10 minutes to several hours. Prozoro then usually requires anything up to 20 working days to evaluate the proposals and final prices. At the end of this period, they will announce the winner. If there are any appeals against the awarding decision, this can take up to 10 days. The final phase is the conclusion of the contract. It is not unusual for this to take up to another 20 days. Therefore, the time from publishing the tender documents to contract signature can therefore take anything from 2 weeks to several months. The time for contract execution will of course depend upon the nature of the contract and its terms. We've covered a lot of detail here, so let's summarize where we are and what processes exist. On the next slide, I provide a summary graphic for the life cycle of a public sector project. So here we have it. You can see that projects begin their journey in DREAM with the initiation phase, which covers registration of the project and initial planning. It then moves forward for budgeting and project approval. If additional funding is needed, provided the project has been approved, the project can still move to the next phase of being active. In the active phase of the project, the details, project specification, and tender are finalized. Once this has been done, the project is ready to be registered in Prozoro. It has to be said that I cannot give you a standard timeline from project initiation to registration in Prozoro. During the transfer process from DREAM to Prozoro, it is possible that a single project is broken down into separate sub-projects, each with their own documentation and timeline. Once the project or sub-project is registered in Prozoro, the tender is published is now open to bidding. Those bids that qualify as they satisfy the technical and administrative specifications are the invited to participate in the auction. The auction takes place. The bids together with the final prices are evaluated and a winner is declared. Contracts are then negotiated and concluded. As I indicated on the previous slide, the estimated timeline from publication on Prozoro to contract conclusion is anything from 2 weeks to several months. The time will depend upon 2 key factors: the complexity and size of the project, the urgency for its completion. Well, that's the first of my 3 videos completed. It just remains for me to add some concluding remarks. I hope you found this video, the typical project life cycle, interesting and useful. I have provided the details I think will help you better understand the bidding process, which is the next video in this playlist. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. My contact details are on this slide and in the description below. If you found this information useful, please share this video and playlist with your business colleagues. Above all else, remember, we are here to help. My name is Marina Busan-Svirska. I look forward to hearing from you.